Welcome, my friends. Today we are going to explore a story that you think you already know. When you hear the name Saint Patrick, what do you see? Perhaps you see a sea of green, people laughing in the streets, or maybe a cold glass of beer. It is a day of celebration, a day of loud music and bright parades. But behind the green clothes and the parties, there is a man whose life was a paradox. A paradox is something that seems impossible because it has two parts that don't seem to fit together. How did a boy who was not even Irish become the patron saint of Ireland? Think about that for a moment. The most famous symbol of Irish identity was actually born in Britain. He did not grow up loving the land that now celebrates him. In fact, for a long time, he likely hated it. There are many misconceptions about Patrick. A misconception is a wrong idea that many people believe is true. For example, many people think he was a happy priest his whole life. They think he arrived in Ireland with a smile and a magic wand. The truth is much darker and much more beautiful. His story is not about magic. It is about a deep, personal change. It is a story about a person who lost everything to find himself. Have you ever felt like people don't really know the real you? Have you ever felt that your public face is very different from your private heart? Patrick felt this way too. To understand the man, we must go back to the beginning. We must go back to a time before the green hats and the parades. We must go back to a time of fear. Imagine a young boy standing on a beach, looking at the ocean. He has no idea that his life is about to change forever. He has no idea that the enemy across the water will one day become his family. This is the journey of a man who turned his pain into a purpose. This is the journey of the real Saint Patrick. Let's begin our story in a place of comfort, right before it all fell apart. Before he was a saint, he was just a boy named Maewyn Succat. He lived a life of great privilege in Roman Britain. Privilege means having special rights or a comfortable life that others do not have. Maewyn's father was a wealthy official. The family had a big house, warm clothes, and plenty of food. Maewyn did not care much about religion or hard work. He was a teenager who enjoyed his social status or his high position in society. But one day, the sky turned dark. This was the day of his kidnapping. Irish pirates arrived on the shores of Britain, looking for people to capture and sell. In a single moment, Maewyn was grabbed and thrown onto a cold, wet boat. He was only 16 years old. Can you imagine the fear in his heart as the shore of his home disappeared? He was to be stripped of everything he knew. To be stripped of something means to have it taken away by force. He was no longer a wealthy son. He was now a slave. His clothes were taken. His name was taken. Even his sense of who he was began to break. This is what we call a shattered persona. His old life was like a mirror that had been smashed into 1,000 pieces. Think about your own life. Who are you without your job, your money, or your home? If someone took away everything you own today, what would be left of you? Maewyn had to face this question in the worst way possible. He was sold to a man in a strange, wild land called Ireland. He went from a house of stone to a cold mountain. He was lonely, terrified, and confused. Why did this happen to him? Was he being punished? The boy he used to be was gone. The pirates didn't just steal his body. They stole his future. Or, at least, they stole the future he thought he wanted. They brought him to a place where his old social status meant nothing. On that boat, as the waves crashed against the wood, Maewyn Succat died. And slowly, painfully, Patrick began to be born. Patrick was sent to Mount Slemish to herd sheep. For 6 long years, he lived in complete isolation. Isolation is the state of being completely alone, far away from other people. He was alone with the wind, the rain, and the animals. He did not have a warm bed or enough clothes. Often he suffered from starvation, which means he was very, very hungry because there was no food. During these years, Patrick had a constant internal monologue. An internal monologue is the private conversation we have inside our own minds. At first, his voice was likely full of anger and sadness. Why am I here? I want to go home. I hate this mountain. These were the thoughts that probably filled his head every day. But something strange happens when you are alone for a long time. When the noise of the world stops, you start to hear a different voice. You start to look deep inside yourself. Patrick began to pray. He prayed 100 times during the day and 100 times at night. In the cold woods and the freezing rain, he found a connection to something bigger. This was the start of his spiritual awakening. A spiritual awakening is when a person suddenly finds a deep meaning or a connection to the divine. He wasn't just a slave anymore. He was a person with a soul. Have you ever had a mountain in your life? A time when you felt totally alone and life was very hard? It is in those quiet, difficult places that we often find our greatest strength. Patrick's shadow, his fear and his pain, became his teacher. He learned how to survive. He learned how to be patient. Most importantly, he learned how to listen. The mountain was not just a prison. It was a school. It was a place where he learned the language and the customs of the Irish people. He didn't know it yet, but he was being prepared for something great. He was no longer the spoiled boy from Britain. He was a man who knew the taste of hunger and the sound of the silence. He was ready for the next step of his journey. One night, while he was sleeping, the silence finally spoke back to him. A voice in his dream told him it was time. The wilderness had done its work. One night, Patrick heard a voice in his sleep. It said, "See, your ship is ready." But there was a problem. Patrick was in the middle of a country where he was a slave, and the nearest coast was 200 miles away. Logic told him to stay. Logic told him that running away was suicide, but Patrick chose to follow his intuition. Intuition is that gut feeling or inner knowledge that doesn't use logic. He believed he had a prophetic dream. A prophetic dream is a dream that shows you what will happen in the future. He felt a deep certainty that he had to leave immediately. So he decided to flee. To flee means to run away from a dangerous situation very quickly. He walked across the wild Irish landscape, hiding in the shadows and traveling by night. This was an act of incredible risk-taking. If he were caught, he would likely be killed. He had no map, no money, and no help. He only had his faith and his inner voice. Think about a time when you had to make a big decision. Did you follow what your brain said or what your heart felt? Patrick's journey was a 200-mile walk of pure trust. When he finally reached the coast, he saw a ship. It was exactly like his dream. But the captain of the ship did not want to take him. Patrick did not give up. He prayed, and eventually the captain changed his mind. Patrick sailed away from the land of his slavery and finally returned to his family in Britain. His parents were overjoyed to see him. They wanted him to stay forever and never leave their sight again. They wanted him to return to his old life of comfort and safety. But Patrick was different now. The boy who left had been shattered, and the man who returned was changed. He had a secret in his heart that he couldn't ignore. He had escaped the mountain, but the mountain was still inside him. He had found his freedom, but he soon realized that true freedom is not just running away from pain. Sometimes, true freedom is going back to the place where you were hurt. Patrick was about to make a choice that would confuse everyone who loved him. After returning home, Patrick became a priest. He studied hard and found peace in his religion, but soon the dreams started again. He heard the voices of the Irish people calling to him. They said, "We beg you, holy youth, to come and walk among us once more." This was his mission. A mission is a very important task or a life's purpose. Many people would think he was crazy. Why would anyone go back to the place where they were kidnapped? Ireland was a place of trauma for him. Trauma is a very painful emotional experience that stays with you for a long time. But Patrick understood something about reconciliation. Reconciliation is the act of making peace with a person or a situation that caused conflict. He didn't want revenge. He wanted to help. He decided to answer the call. To answer the call means to accept a difficult challenge because you feel it is your duty. He chose to turn his place of pain into his place of power. Imagine the courage it took to get back on a boat to Ireland. He was going back to the people who had enslaved him. But he wasn't going back as a victim. We all have places in our past that we are afraid of. Maybe it is a memory, a person, or a mistake we made. Is there a trauma in your life that you need to face? Patrick's return is a lesson in integration. Integration means taking the different parts of your life, the good and the bad, and making them whole. He took his knowledge of the Irish language and his love for the people and used them to bring a new message. He arrived in Ireland not as a stranger, but as someone who understood the heart of the country. He knew their stories, their fears, and their hopes. He didn't try to change them by force. He tried to change them by speaking their language and living among them. He became a bridge between two worlds. His life was no longer about escaping his past. It was about using his past to build a better future. The slave had returned as a leader. The journey was just beginning. Patrick was about to use the simplest things in nature to explain the deepest mysteries of life. When Patrick began to teach, he faced a big problem. He wanted to explain the Trinity, the idea that God is three parts but also one. This is a very difficult concept to understand. Instead of using long, boring books, he looked at the ground. He picked up a small green plant with 3 leaves, the shamrock. He used it as a metaphor. A metaphor is when you use one simple thing to help people understand a more complex idea. "See this plant?" he might have said. "It has 3 leaves, but it is one plant." This is the beauty of simplicity. Simplicity means making things easy to understand and clear. Patrick knew that people don't need complicated words to learn the truth. He was teaching a religious doctrine, which is a set of beliefs. But he didn't do it in a cold cathedral. He did it outside, in the fields and under the trees. This was a nature-based teaching. He used the world around him to show people the beauty of his message. The Irish people loved nature, so they understood his message quickly. Think about the best teachers you have ever had. Did they use big, fancy words, or did they make things simple? True wisdom is often found in the simplest things. The shamrock became a symbol of hope. It wasn't just a weed anymore. It was a lesson. It showed that even the smallest things can have a very deep meaning. Patrick's alchemy was his ability to turn something common into something sacred. He didn't need gold or silver to impress people. He only needed a little green leaf. Even today, the shamrock is the most famous symbol of Ireland. It reminds us that we can find big answers in small places. It reminds us to keep our eyes open to the beauty of the world. Patrick was not just a priest. He was a communicator. He knew how to connect with people's hearts. He knew that if you want to reach someone, You have to meet them where they are. But as his message grew, he had to deal with the old fears of the land. He had to face the snakes that lived in the hearts of the people. There is a very famous legend about St. Patrick. A legend is an old story that might not be 100% true, but carries a powerful message. The legend says that Patrick chased all the snakes out of Ireland. But here is a secret. Scientists say there were never any real snakes in Ireland. So what does the story really mean? The story uses symbolism. Symbolism is when an object or an animal represents an idea. In this story, the snakes represent the darkness, or the old, scary beliefs that kept people in fear. Patrick didn't just walk around with a stick hitting animals. He worked to banish the internal snakes. To banish means to send something away forever, especially something bad. He was helping the people move away from paganism, which refers to the ancient religions that often involved many gods and sometimes fearful rituals. He wanted to replace fear with love and peace. The snakes were the old habits, the old angers, and the old ways of thinking. Patrick showed the people that they could be free from their internal shadows. What are the snakes in your own life? Is it a fear of failing? Is it a habit that makes you unhappy? We all have something inside us that we need to banish so we can grow. Patrick's story tells us that we have the power to change. We don't have to stay the same forever. We can clear the snakes out of our own hearts and make room for something better. This is why the story is so powerful. It isn't about animals. It is about the human spirit. It is about the light winning over the darkness. By banishing the snakes, Patrick helped create a new culture. He helped Ireland become a land of learning and art. He turned a wild place into a land of saints and scholars. The impact of his work didn't stay in Ireland. It began to spread across the ocean, carried by the people who loved his story. Patrick's legacy was becoming something much larger than one man. It was becoming a story for the whole world. Today, St. Patrick's Day is celebrated in more countries than almost any other national holiday. Why does his story have such a strong global resonance? Part of the reason is the Irish diaspora. A diaspora is a large group of people who have spread out from their original homeland to other parts of the world. When Irish people moved to America, Australia, or Canada, they brought Patrick's story with them. It was a piece of their heritage. Heritage is the history, traditions, and culture that come from your ancestors. For these people, St. Patrick was more than a saint. He was a symbol of home. He was a reminder that you can be far away from your country, but still keep your culture alive in your heart. The cultural impact of this holiday is massive. Every year on March 17th, the world turns green. Even people who are not Irish wear green and join the celebration. This is a sign of solidarity. Solidarity means support or agreement among a group of people who have a common interest. On this day, we celebrate the idea that we can all belong to one human family. Have you ever been to a St. Patrick's Day parade? Even if you are far from Ireland, you might see the green lights on buildings or hear Irish music. It is a moment when the world feels a little bit smaller and a little more connected. Patrick's story resonates because it is a story of resilience. It is about a person who was a slave but became a hero. It is about a land that was poor but became rich in spirit. People everywhere can relate to the idea of overcoming hard times. We all want to believe that our pain can lead to something beautiful. St. Patrick's Day is a celebration of survival. It is a celebration of the idea that a small island can have a huge heart. It is a reminder that one person's life can change the world forever. As the party ends and the green lights fade, the real lesson of Patrick remains. It is a lesson that is not just for the Irish, but for you and for me. We have traveled a long way with Patrick. We saw him lose his home, suffer on a mountain, and return to his captors with love in his heart. Every life has its own adversity. Adversity is a difficult or unpleasant situation. We all have moments where we feel like a slave to our circumstances or lost in a cold wilderness. But Patrick shows us that transformation is possible. Transformation is a complete change in someone's appearance or character, usually for the better. You are not stuck where you are today. In psychology, we call this process individuation. Individuation is the journey of becoming your own true, unique self. It is the process of integrating your past and your future into one whole person. Patrick had to go to the mountain to find his voice. He had to go back to Ireland to find his purpose. He had to lose his old identity to find his true soul. What is your Slemish mountain? What is the challenge that is forcing you to grow? Don't be afraid of the quiet or the hard times. They might be preparing you for your mission. My friends, here is the final takeaway. A final takeaway is the most important thing to remember from a story. The takeaway is this: your past does not define you, but it can refine you. Your pain can be the very thing that helps you help others. You can turn your snakes into shamrocks. And you, the listener, what will you do with your journey? Will you listen to your intuition? Will you have the courage to return to the places that scared you? Think about Patrick the next time you see the color green. Remember the boy on the mountain. Remember the man with the leaf. Thank you for joining me on this journey of transformation. I hope you find the strength to climb your own mountain and the wisdom to find your own shamrock. Happy St. Patrick's Day, not just for the party, but for the beautiful, brave soul inside of you. Be well, and keep listening to your own heart. Until next time.